link is good to send to
Yeah, the
Lucas
link is
because he
good.
said he might.
And we're live, by the way. And the
Okay.
link is good. Um, Whatever. We somehow got people you may experience buffering, apparently. Because for whatever reason, it went from good connection to whatever. Must be a YouTube thing. Anyways, welcome to the show. We're talking about differences in different countries with coronavirus, apparently.
Yes. So, hey guys, it's Laura, Tony's co-host, Six Wing Productions, what have you. We have the redneck Cody back with us again. He will be kind of our mediator when it comes to reacting to different countries, as he is about as American as it gets. So me and Six Wing Productions will be talking about various countries. He will be reacting to it. So the first country that we have to share with you guys is Italy. So if you guys know, Italy has a very, very small base where they have military. I'm not too well versed on military, Air Force, what have you, whatever. But when it comes to strictness, they've been pretty strict for how small of an area they are. So right now, they just, like, very recently got permission to get takeaway food, meaning, you can go to the place and then take it out to go. Um, and for the most part, they have stuff that's like opening up very slowly, but you can't really do a whole lot. Like, you could only order delivery for a while. Um, and actually, most of the manufacturing plants aren't even open. So, what do you have to say to that, Cody, about Italy?
You know, I think people have blown this thing way out of proportion. I mean, the statistics kind of show that this we're looking at a 0.03% fatality rate. And while yes, it's sad that people die, the fact of the matter is people die every day. From the time you're born, you're dying.
Hmm.
Uh, so really, this thing isn't. I don't think this thing's any worse than any other typical flu season, really.
And when you think about Italy, the thing you got to remember is Italy is a very touchy feely, big gatherings. Italy and Greece are a lot alike in that sense. And they both have very old, elderly populations. So when you get hit by
Right.
this thing at the same time as the flu, then you have the deaths from this and the deaths from the flu combined, which is what overwhelmed the healthcare system in the end. Because some of it was influenza, some of it was this new coronavirus. Thing is, they got hit with both at the same time in the big cities. And that's how Italy got hit so bad because they live really close. Families tend to stay in the same home for generations and all that stuff. And that's how it spread so quick in Italy because of a cultural thing.
Hmm.
Granted,
So, how big is Italy?
Italy,
Yeah, unless you don't know that information offhand. I was just wondering.
60.36 million.
Okay.
And then if you look at the coronavirus, they had 200. Okay, so that's 60.63 million. They've had 217 confirmed cases, 999,000 recovered, 30,201 dead.
Hmm.
Now,
Okay.
that's what's a 66 point some mil, or 60 point some million people. So not even 10% of the population was even infected, and less than one, about half of a percent of it them died.
The other thing is from the American standpoint, I know that the CDC numbers are totally skewed.
Oh yeah.
Um, so in America, we don't actually have valid um, statistics to even look at as far as infection rates, cases, what have you. And if we do, they're not being released because the CDC is actually paying hospitals more money. This cause of death is COVID.
Oh yeah.
I think I heard that too.
Granted,
But
allow me to turn around this one though. Italy has that population of 60.36 million. Okay.
right.
Now, granted, they have a shrinking population because they're a developed country, and like in our country, the young are not having children because there's no money in the children's future because, like in our country, they grossly underpay their workers in Japan. While Japan has a total population of 126.5 million people, they only have 15,547 confirmed cases, 5,906 of which have recovered, and only 557 have died. Now, we have to look back here, despite the fact that Japan was hit later than Italy. What is the differences between Italy and Japan? Well, Japan is a very clean country. Yes, it's tight spaces, but it's a very clean country. Everyone's always washing their hands. If you have the sniffles, you wear a mask. You wear a mask, you don't blow your nose in public. You know, things that in the Western world, Europe, America, would seem normal, it's considered very rude in Japan. So you can see where culture has had a huge, tremendous impact on the spread of this virus.
Japan, do they have a lot of cases?
I just read it, 15,547.
I mean,
So even less than.
what's their population again?
Their population, 126.5 million.
And they have that low of cases?
Yep.
It's almost infinitesimal.
Oh, shit. That's like almost nothing.
And the reason that is because Japan has a culture of if you're sick, stay home.
Right.
Even if it's just a cold.
No.
They're very germophobic in Japan.
As a rule, are they under government lockdown?
They are under a lockdown sort of thing, where some things are closed down, but not as much as here. They just a second extends emergency state of emergency, but from what I've read, they have plummeting numbers, and they really don't have a shutdown per se. Mostly just people voluntarily stayed at home, went remote. Granted, one good thing that's happening in Japan is the companies are being forced to finally upgrade from fax machines to email. Because they were all
just now moving to that?
Well, Japan is a very traditional country. And a lot of their offices look like something out of the 70s still. So 70s and 80s still. So
then it's more so China that's like really advanced with like tech and shit,
right?
Oh
no, Japan's really advanced with tech. It's just businesses still use fax machines because you use a fax machine. They don't want to they don't want to change because they don't want to give out their fax machine. They're very stubborn like that. So
interesting.
But here's the thing. Because Japan has the masks and stuff, and people buy masks. If you go online and look at Japan, every corner store you can buy a mask, a cloth mask, in case you're sick.
Right.
They sell custom designed masks with like Hello Kitty, Kamen Rider, Gundam, all that sort of Japanese anime stuff for the kids, and people are into that sort of stuff. And most people have multiple masks and stockpiles of masks because cold and allergy season, it is considered rude not to wear a mask and to sneeze and cough and hack at everybody else, and you only blow your nose in that in the bathroom and all that stuff. And even the bathrooms don't have a lot of hand dryers. You have to carry your own towel in a lot of places where there's public restrooms after washing your hands to dry them. So they have a lot of not sharing things.
Yeah.
So germ spread in Japan is very low. Because they are like that. Which is
like, what hypothetically would they share?
Not much. Japan is a very conservative, very respectful culture. Like Laura, you know how I call you Laura
Yeah.
and you call me Tony? We're friends, so in Japan we would still be able to kind of do that. But if I didn't know you, like here in America, we don't use Mr. and Mrs. like we really should to be respectful because, our culture's kind of set everyone on the first name basis. Well, in Japan, you would be Quinting-san, and I would be Koss-san. Mrs. Quinting or Miss Quinting and Mr. Koss. You don't use first names unless you're a family, dating, or a very close friend.
Oh, wow.
That's interesting. So it's very formal.
Very formal. Even in casual, there is some sense of formality. So, and Tokyo is the most heavily, densely populated city on the planet Earth. So obviously population density isn't a factor here.
Well, and that was the point that I kind of wanted to bring out, or kind of revert back to, is, this just kind of proves what I've been saying and what others have been saying this whole time, and that is, this is not anything to really freak out about. It's not anything that serious. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say anything. I guess I shouldn't say that it's not serious, but it's not any more serious than any other cold and flu season that's been happening for millennia.
Oh no, the seriousness of this situation is the fact that it's happening during flu season. If we didn't already have the flu cases on top of the COVID cases, we'd be fine. It's the combination that's overwhelming certain medical systems in certain places. But that's only in certain places. And if you look at American cities versus American, Italian, Western civilization cities versus most, like, a lot of Asian cities, China is a kind of a different story because they kind of covered it up and it kind of spread because they have their population so poor and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look more at Japan, South Korea, now South Korea is not as much as Japan because Japan compared to like every other planet is like germaphobe.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thing. Japan, Tokyo is one of the cleanest cities on earth. You don't litter. There's no trash cans everywhere. If you have trash, you stick it in your pocket and you wait till you find a trash can. Usually at the next convenience store if you're lucky. So, pretty much stuff I would say is common courtesy, don't throw your shit on the ground. But if you look at American cities, they're filthy. Homeless everywhere. You've got rats everywhere. There's trash in the streets. They try to keep it clean, but they can't. New York is a way filthier city than Tokyo, and it's a smaller city by population.
Wow.
Vastly smaller. It's like Tokyo is 50 million people live in Tokyo. And New York City has a population of 8.39 million. So Tokyo has almost 10 times the population, is much cleaner, and if I go to look at the New York City COVID cases, COVID-19 in New York City is 182,000 confirmed cases in the city versus 15,547 in all of Japan. So almost 10 times the population, a fraction of the cases. Something's working in Japan that's not working here. And I think it's our culture of just throw everything where it is, cough and sneeze in people's faces, don't respect people, that sort of thing. I think this is a case where in some ways, every culture is better than some ways in every other culture. But I think this is one of those times where something in the Japanese culture that allows them to be this way is so much better than ours that it keeps it there. Because if we were like them in like sick days, you don't fire them because they didn't come to work because they're sick. You want them to stay home when they're sick. And don't force people to have to go to work when they're sick because they can't go to the doctor or they can't afford to miss work. Or people wore masks whenever they were sick if they had to go to work or something like that, I think the spread would have been far less. But here in America,
Mm-hmm.
you miss work because you're sick, doesn't matter. You're still fired because sick days are not a thing in America.
No, like unless you're in a really good, like very few workplaces that I know of offer really good benefits, and most of those workplaces are either decent manufacturing plants or a desk job. Like you don't really get decent benefits like working in like grocery stores or restaurants and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, and despite the belief of the workaholicness in Japan, because like sleep at the office and whatnot like that, America actually works the most hours and is the most workaholic country on the planet Earth.
Yeah, I think I read an article saying that our work hours compared to Germany's, even with this quarantine, we are still beating them heavily by almost a third of the hours.
Yeah, because we don't pay people enough money to live on so they can take time off work, and we punish them for staying home when they're sick. Even though we tell them in the handbooks of every workplace, if you're sick, please stay home. But if you stay home, we didn't tell you that we will write you up. I was working, when I had my second job at Cracker Barrel, I got written up for being home sick with a fever
I
because I didn't
think
try to come into work.
I've gone into work sick a decent amount of times, unless I'm like literally throwing up or like I feel like I cannot get out of bed, will I stay home?
Yeah, pretty
And
much.
the thing is, that's with everyone's mentality. Unless you are basically dying, most people do not call off work because they can't afford it.
And if they do it too many times, they'll get fired. Which almost
Yeah,
happened to me when we
because
worked at that
then you're
McDonald's.
considered
Because
negligent at that point.
I had an actual medical condition on file that made me get sick all the time, the IBS. Well, I called off work so much because of it that I was threatened to lose my job, and I learned pretty quick at that point to come to work even if you're sick. So
I had a coworker that was like that as well. He ended up having some medical problems, called in a couple of times at work, and they sacked him. And unfortunately, he was at a temp agency, so they kept moving him to different spots.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've talked about Japan for a decent amount of time.
Well, that's the only thing I could think I really went after was Japan. So you guys are going to have to come up with some other stuff. But...
And I did try to Google some stuff in Japan. Quarantine in Japan, I don't know if it's just their government thing, but I found very little search stuff in that topic. So they might be filtering out some stuff. But anyways, we're going to move on to Bolivia. So we were going to have a guest actually from Bolivia on this podcast. But he didn't want to misspeak. Totally understand. This is information straight from the U.S. Embassy in Bolivia, so it's all 100% facts unless people want to say, oh, well, government don't know about Bolivia.
So in
that could be a
essence,
thing
folks,
too.
Laura's attempt to make this far more formal than we usually do it scared off the guest.
Yeah. So anyways, here are a few things that I thought was pretty interesting about their quarantine that sounded like it was fucking straight out of a movie. So, I'm not entirely sure where the ID is equivalent to when it comes to the US version. Like, we have a social security number and we have like an ID number that you would use for your license / the ID card that you can like buy cigarettes for and shit, but don't drive. Yeah, state ID. Well, anyways, people who are between the age of 18 and 65, if you are below 18 or if you are above 65, you are not authorized to leave your residence to buy food and basic necessities. So, kids can't go out and old people can't go out, basically. And on certain days of the week, depending on what the ending numbers are of your ID, so say your ending number is 1 and 2, or 1 or 2, then you will go out on Monday. say your ID number was 3 or 4. Then you go out on Tuesday and so forth for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They don't go out at all on weekends. And the grocery stores, markets, and banks are only open 8 a.m. until noon, Monday through Friday, as well as you are only able to get out for emergencies such as going to the doctor, to get tested, whatever, going to the shop. And because it's so small with the time restrictions that you're able to get grocery stores, the grocery stores are actually pretty dangerous to go to because that's kind of where the main people are going at that time. So actually, it's better to go to the smaller like markets and stuff and see if you can find someone that you know that can sell food to you locally that way.
Yeah, until the government decides to confiscate it for the public good. This is Bolivia I'm
So
talking about.
they're trying to open up Bolivia on May 10th, which is very soon. But actually, when they say that they're going to be opening it up, it's still very constricted. Like, they'll have the delivery of food and other commercial goods permitted to be open 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. And jobs such as industry, manufacturing, construction, mining, and hotels will also be able to operate. But my guess is that all of the stuff like movie theaters and, non-essential things will be closed, as well as international um, and domestic flights. Like, the borders will be closed at least until May 31st.
Mm.
So I think what those facts that I read off were most interesting to me was, especially the ID thing. It reminded me of, I never watched the movie, but if our viewers have ever seen a trailer, it was about like this woman, and she had like people that looked just like her, and they were only able to go out on their
What
specific
happened to
day.
Monday?
Yes, that reminds me a lot of that with the ID, where I think in her area, um, like you weren't supposed to have more than one kid or more than one
You weren't
woman or
supposed to have
whatever.
more than one child.
Yeah,
And in the movie, the extra children were supposed to be put in cryogenic freeze, but really what happened is they put them to sleep and they incinerated them.
well,
To
that was the
enforce
end of the
the
movie.
no, what to enforce the one child policy, all the extra children, they said we're just going to put them in cryogenic suspension, and then they ended up incinerating them in the movie, like everyone's extra children. But
Huh.
when they were like twins and whatnot, but the mother didn't want to give up their 5 kids or 7
Right.
kids, so they let one go out every day so that they could all get out, but they could all live.
See, and the thing is, like, that was considered, a fictitious movie. But the scary part is, at least like me being adopted from Beijing, it was very much a thing where you could only have like one kid. And what I mean by that is I was adopted solely for the reason why I'm like sure that, my parents didn't want to give me up, but their government's so strict that either you get rid of it or the government's going to get rid of it, and it's going to be a lot messier.
You were adopted due to a Chinese cultural preference to have male children, so boys, and because they could only have one child, when they had a girl, they put you up for adoption. When
Right.
a lot of the time in China, when they were doing, now they have a 2-child policy, so it's not going to be as bad. But while China was doing that one-child policy, a lot of the times little girls were either aborted or adopted, and now there's too many men in China.
Yeah, because they literally took out most of the girls.
Because of a cultural preference for male heirs.
Right.
Uh-huh.
So I guess, like, with those facts of Bolivia, at least from what I took away from it, they have drastically beat down their numbers. Obviously, COVID is still there, but, they're doing a decent job of not having so many cases.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that, Cody, with those rules that they have?
again, I mean, in context though, Bolivia's, I mean,
like 11 million people or something like that.
right, but they're socially they're not, or not. I don't mean socially, but economically they're not. Um, they're like a second power. They're not like a first world power.
Yeah,
I don't
the
believe.
second world. And second world is pretty much ex-Soviet, ex-communist, ex-fascist, essentially something that's not a third world country, but close to it.
What do you mean by that? Like,
Okay, most.
Their healthcare isn't going to be as good because they don't have the technologies. They don't because
Oh, they have them. They're
can't
just hard to
afford it.
come by.
Right, because they're not as prevalent because they can't afford it because they don't have the GDP that America does, for instance.
Okay.
Or Great Britain, or
Yeah. If I can interject a little bit here, Laura, what I think Cody's trying to get at is this: America, Canada, Europe, Western Russia, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand are all the first world.
okay.
The rest of it is either the second or the third world. Third world is ruled by warlords and is usually just most of Africa and Haiti. Pretty much the places where there's lots of famine and everything else.
Okay.
The second world is semi-stable but still mostly ruled by warlords. The second world would be pretty much all of South America, most of Latin America, including Mexico, and places like the Middle East, the rural parts of China, Mongolia, Vietnam, North Korea. South Korea's first world, North Korea's second because second going into third. So, but
yeah.
the beauty of the second world is, though over the long term they don't make as much money, they aren't as prosperous. The thing is, with prosperity comes specialization. So unlike these other places that can go to the local farmer, go to this and that because everything's so decentralized because they haven't become a first world nation where everything's kind of centralized to these different places, they can still get the resources and afford to miss that much work and shut down their economy, where a first world country where everyone is almost 100% reliant on how much money they can make and have no other way to sustain themselves but making money, it becomes a much more difficult thing to keep people in place, shelter them in place. Because unlike these other places where they have other sources of food, shelter, income, bartering system, in America we don't really have that. And in America, you're supposed to put what you barter on your taxes. So my dad used to plow a snow plow a pizza place in Travers, and we would get free pizza dinners and stuff as barter. And whoever owed whoever money at the end of the year paid at the end of the winter paid up. So it fed us through the unevenness of winter.
Right.
A lot of the time. My dad did not report that on his taxes, but he was supposed to report that and pay the market
taxes
value of the food as a tax. The tax on the market value of that
Because it's
food.
considered, in a way, income, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's bullshit, and there's no way to enforce it, but they also tell you have to pay taxes. There's actually a tax code for paying taxes on your drug money and the money you stole from the bank. So,
See, what interested me most on that, like, you're supposed to be, reporting all of that is, like, similar to, I don't know if you guys know much about influencing or influencers, but they get a bunch of free shit. And I'm 100% sure that they're not reporting every single free thing they've ever gotten in their life.
Well, you see, Laura, that's a different story, though. You aren't being bartered with the free stuff. You're being given a product to review for free to keep and review. You're not being paid for the review of the product with the product. You're providing a free review and they are providing you a free sample so that you can review it. It's providing resources, not funds. So it's not a tax thing there.
But some would consider that a payment. Like you're getting the item.
But
You're
it's
getting the item.
not.
See, I don't know enough about taxes to know for sure what you're saying is correct, but
Okay, they are letting you keep the item because it's being used in the review. Okay? But you are being given a review item. It's like when a game person reviews games and they're just being given a free copy so they can do their review. That free copy is not payment for the review. They're just being given it so they can review it because it's free advertising for the company. So the company does that, and you review it.
So the company would probably have to do some tax shit for like advertising.
They take it as a loss on that one.
Oh, they wouldn't consider it like advertising expenses?
Kind of, sort of, not really.
Oh.
Essentially, you're never going to get a tax form from the company because they paid you in a free review sample.
Okay.
Because that's not how it works. You didn't do any. They did not give you something for work you did. They gave you something so you could do the work, and then told you afterwards you could just keep it because they couldn't resell it.
Right.
That's
so at the end of the day,
more like gifting than income.
Yeah. I guess at the end of the day, if all of us hypothetically were in the situation of having the restrictions that Bolivia does, on an end note, since we are at almost 40 minutes, how would you think that the U.S. would take it, or how do you think we would react to those restrictions?
Viva la revolution.
You think that, World War III would happen or something?
Well, not World War III, but if we had the Bolivian type of restrictions, you can bet your ass there'd be a revolt in this country. Civil War #2, here we go.
I mean, Michigan already revolted over what we have now, basically.
Oh, that wasn't a revolt. That was just protest. Nobody got shot.
I mean, if you look at America from a historical standpoint, we have never been very good at following directions.
No, we're bad at it.
I mean, our whole country came into existence because people didn't want to pay a tax.
And it wasn't even that big of one either. And here's the thing. Between income and property tax, which are both forms of theft, essentially that's stealing your income, and property tax says that you can't own, pretty much says you never own your own property, which essentially outlaws private property. And all that stuff. Not to mention civil forfeiture, eminent domain. These things what the government does, which are theft, really, would just be the last straw that broke the camel's back, as it were. That sort of restriction. Because there's already enough anger against the government from both sides for vastly different reasons. You got Antifa and the neo-Nazi guys both ready to duke it out about stuff, and they're both socialists. Nazism is the National Socialist Party. Fascism is a form of socialism. Antifa are a bunch of communists. Mostly. So you got that fight that was already brewing. You got the potential race war that the Democratic Party has been trying to push to keep the minorities voting for them. And you've got an economic revolt that's been created by the Republicans helping to foster a culture where nobody can make a living wage, and we can just tell them, well, you don't deserve a living wage because of your job, despite the fact that not paying everyone a living wage is an unsustainable long-term economic model. So, because you can't have an army of all generals and no privates, and the general can't make a living right now, is how I like to put it. So, essentially, we've created a society where pretty much nobody that isn't already in their 30s or 40s, late 30s, mid 40s, can make a living, and with a few exceptions, of course. And then we say how good this is, and let's tell everyone, just finance everything, get a bunch of loans. Oh, we'll do a leverage buyback, where we go as a company, take out a bunch of debt to buy back our stock, to drive up stock prices, because we illegally bound to drive up stock prices because of the very old shareholders who do not understand the long-term implications, and neither do they care because all these people know this is going to happen, but they don't care because they believe they're going to be dead before the collapse happens. Doesn't matter to them, they'll be dead. And that's what created this situation. If we would just paid everyone a living wage, people hadn't been fooled into the idea that they can finance their way into wealth, then we could have shut down our economy because everyone would have had plenty of savings. And landlords wouldn't have mortgages on all their properties and would be able to handle not getting the cash flow.
Essentially, that's what caused the housing bubble of 08.
And we've got another housing bubble going on right now, and a student loan bubble, and a credit card bubble. And they're already all about to pop. Oh, here comes coronavirus and an economic shutdown.
I know in Michigan they just started opening up real estate where like now it's only a couple people are allowed to be in the room for a showing, but I'm like, who the hell is going to buy a house right now?
Well, I mean, construction just opened up on the 7th, so...
Well, so
are you
did
kidding
a lot
me?
of people that were happy.
Golf places.
Interest rates
just
are at an
opened up.
all-time low.
Yeah.
Although
That's a good point.
Although all the banks are now deciding that they are going to be looking much more closely at your credit cards, they have been going around and reducing people's credit limits without notice. That should be illegal because what if you're already over the new limit that they're going to give you? Are you now going to get charged being over that limit and you can't afford to take care of it and now they default you? Kind of be stupid. So
Right.
I really think they're going to go
I
after the
always
people with the
thought-
ungodly limits who don't, make their payments on time.
See, what I always thought with when it comes to banks is at least how Chase works for me was I was given a limit of like 1,000 or 2,000 or whatever, and I ended up making my payments on time for several months, and then they bumped me to 5,000. Like I thought other banks did that. Like based on your history,
What's
you get
really
more.
happening is I think what's happening is they're taking a close look at people's incomes, at their credit scores, because now if you don't have a credit score of 720% down, several banks won't even lend you money to buy a house, which just priced out a bunch of people from ever owning a home, and rent's already unaffordable. Buying a home was the only way to ever get savings. So,
Right.
Granted, subprime will still happen. You'll still be able to find the loans to get a house. It's just going to be much more difficult now. But here's the thing. I think the ones they're taking down are like a guy who has $15,000 credit card limit. Now you only get $8,000. I don't think they're going to go after people like you and me with like $2,500, $5,000, stuff like that. The chump change credit cards.
Oh yeah, that's.
I think they're going to
a
go
good
after
point.
people with credit lines that are tens of thousands of dollars. Those kind of people, I think they're going to be going after more than us, personally.
Right.
Because at all low amount, they probably consider that you're already probably close to maxed out a lot of the time, and reducing your credit limit, therefore causing it to be over the limit and increasing your minimum payment to have to bring it under the limit, otherwise inducing fees, would encourage you to go into default, which is something they do not want.
Right.
So I don't think they're going to reduce people's limits to below where their balance is. And besides,
I hope they don't lower my limit.
$1,000, $2,500 is considered a low starting limit on a credit card.
Right. I think my lowest limit is Huntington because they're very, very picky on who they allow, and they only gave me like 500 for my limit.
Oh yeah.
My opinion on if we did the whole Bolivia thing, we'd do it for like a day or two, and then we would have people basically threatening to shoot Whitmer at that point.
There wouldn't be threats. They would just happen.
You're awful, Tony.
I'm realistic.
Cody, that wouldn't happen.
Like I said, historically, we are very bad at following directions, and we as a nation we take stuff to a certain point and then we just have enough.
I believe it was Fort Shiloh. Essentially, that was the last straw for the Union to finally declare on the South, the South actually started it by firing their first shot. And though we don't know who fired the first shot, the fight in Boston, known as the Boston Massacre, forced Congress's hand into declaring independence after a few months afterwards. Essentially,
And you're in the Civil War. You're thinking Fort Sumter, by the way.
or Fort Sumter.
Yep.
I knew it started with an S. I just watched a video on it earlier.
Was history like one of the only things you paid attention to in high school?
Me? Or Cody?
No, Cody.
Not the only thing, but I was very good at it.
You see,
That's a fair statement.
well, you see, if I could have made any money at it, I would have gone to college to be a historian.
He's
Become a
like an
history teacher.
encyclopedia, but for historical facts.
Oh, I've got other facts too. You know that.
Between the three of us, the redneck and my co-host are good at history, and one of the only subjects I was good at was math. So,
But
I'm
that's
going to avoid
Nick
the
is
Asian
laughing in the
joke.
background.
but that's again stereotypically,
Yeah, you just made a horribly racist joke way too easy to make, Laura.
Shut up. But interestingly enough, with the whole Corona thing, is that apparently,
Actually, I feel like I got
so
pretty far on it.
we're not gonna share where we live, like our hometown or anything. But there's this dude that supposedly blasted on Facebook Lowe's. So Lowe's said you cannot go into our store if you are not wearing a mask. Well, that person claimed that he had asthma or something similar to that, and he didn't go into Lowe's without a mask. And he said that the police came to hunt and take him off the premises and arrest him, which to me sounds like horse shit, as I'm pretty sure the police aren't doing anything.
Oh yeah.
Well, at least here in down in Owasso, a barber opened up his shop because he couldn't do anything else. Credit cards maxed out, and what have you. And he's gotten 3 citations already.
For what?
For cutting hair with a mask on, and he wears a mask and surgical gloves to cut hair.
He has not been able to get unemployment. Social Security isn't keeping the bills paid because it never does. Any investments he may have made aren't there because the market's crashed.
Yeah, I can water him.
He has no choice but to go to work. And they're telling him how he's being irresponsible. Essentially, people want people to go bankrupt and starve and die because if you don't do that, you're risking other people's health and lives.
I thought like hair places were like not supposed to be open at all, so isn't what he's doing technically illegal?
Technically, the closing down of anything without due process is a violation of the Constitution.
The thing is, with Whitmer, the legislative branch did not extend her emergency powers that gives her the power to do what she's doing. So essentially, she used her emergency powers to extend her emergency powers,
Which she could not do. That has to be ratified by the legislature, which it was not.
Right. So essentially, the whole damn thing is illegal.
Yeah.
Right.
Huh. Wait, is this So she extended her own powers to extend the amount of time that we have this thing going for.
Right, because she's already stated that Michigan is going to be the last state that opens up, regardless of anything else.
She's being sued by she has 16 different lawsuits against her, and one of them is by the legislature.
Oh, wow.
Not to mention a million signatures on a recall ballot.
There's already people campaigning to replace her in a special election.
Is that more than the amount of people that tried to get Trump out of office?
Yeah.
Way
Oh,
more.
wow. I didn't know that would be possible.
Yeah, she is actually hated more in the state of Michigan than Trump is at the moment.
See, I mean, I don't agree. See, I didn't agree with some of the things that they shut down, like manufacturing and shit like that. As long as people were being safe and shit, which honestly, the way Amazon was going, it doesn't sound like they were being very safe.
Amazon's
But
never very safe. They let people die of heat stroke in their warehouses.
But, you know, had they made the correct changes, I don't think shutting all this shit down was needed.
The thing is,
It probably wasn't needed at
these
all.
these places of business already had protocols in place for something like this.
Yeah.
She's just being pig-headed and stubborn. You know, she said she wanted to. The whole reason to start with this was to flatten the curve so that the healthcare system wouldn't collapse. Well, guess what? She's gone too far to the extreme on the one side because now the health system is collapsing, but it's only collapsing because the hospitals can't afford to stay open because they don't have cases stacking in like cordwood.
But yet there's all these news articles that are saying, oh my gosh, there's 500 new cases. Oh my gosh, there's 100 more cases.
Okay.
That's in Detroit and Lansing.
And you think about statistically who writes who owns the major news corporations? CNN,
Fox,
NBC, Fox, all of those.
Right.
They're funded in part by the Democratic National Convention. What political party is Gretchen Whitmer a part of?
Yeah. You know, normally I would say that the Democrats and Republicans are no better than each other, but right now, what I see the Democrats doing is far worse than anything I see the Republicans doing. This is about control now. I am convinced.
It is. That's all it is. It's
and
the thing is, what's sad and what's sickening about this whole thing is people are actually bitching because you have people standing up and saying, no, I want to go back to work because the government's promised them all this money that they can make just by staying home. But the problem is, what's going to happen when the government runs out of money? Because ultimately, the government is funded by our tax dollars.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And they ran out of money to give to businesses, didn't they?
Yeah.
Now, granted, there was a point to saying the government has money, it just needs to pull it out of other places. And if the government hadn't decided that, because I was watching this thing. Do either of you guys remember the old HBO series John Adams?
No.
No, but I wanted to finish at one last point. You know, she has extended her stimulus packages so much that the state of Michigan is in so much debt that we won't hope to be out of debt until 2045.
That's nothing new for Michigan.
That is 25 years.
But the stimulus package that we were given was the same as other states.
But she's given free college to all the healthcare workers, and she's given different bonuses, different incentives. She's given this. You know, if you get federal unemployment, you also get $500 extra a week from state unemployment too. So Michigan has its own set of perks for staying home on top of what the feds are giving.
Shit.
The problem with that is the state of Michigan is now in debt for the next 25 years.
Oh, damn, I'm getting paid jack squat.
So
to
essentially,
pay for Governor Whitmer's stupidity.
So essentially, everyone in Michigan, stay home, collect all the unemployment checks, pay off as much of your debt as you can with all that precious unemployment money that's way more than you were making a week staying home, when you went to work, and then get the hell out of that state before your taxes go through the roof like California.
Pretty much, because, like I said, it's going to take us 25 years to pay it back.
Well, you see, I actually applied for partial unemployment here in Indiana. I won't get anything from the state, but I will get something from federal. Because it's COVID-19 related. So, because I'm only working 3 days a week right now because of the COVID-19. And
How long were you off work, Cody?
I was off for 4 weeks, and I didn't collect a dime of anything.
Yeah, I didn't collect anything either, even though I could have collected for at
Well,
least a week or two.
No, that's not to say I didn't apply. That's just saying that I couldn't get through to Marvin.
Oh, okay. I
And
just didn't
because
feel
I
like
couldn't-
doing it.
Because I couldn't get through, I couldn't get any benefits. So it really didn't do me jack shit. But now I am part of the many that is going to have to pay back everything that the few got.
yeah.
Yep.
Because statistically, only about 30% of Marvin claims are actually going through.
Mm.
Because guess what? Marvin's system was broke long before this shutdown started. But then the governor didn't say, oh, by the way, we're going to have a partial shutdown. You might want to start gearing up.
I take it Marvin is the Michigan unemployment system.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, here in what I wanted to say though about that whole thing with the John Adams, real quick, the national debt. It turns out that there is an idea to borrow money from overseas to create influence. Which doesn't make any money. I would think lending someone money would give you more influence than borrowing their money. I would say borrowing their money gives them influence over you. So it's one of those things. Granted, the American debt is actually mostly owned by American citizens who bought federal bonds. Individuals and businesses. American individual and American businesses own most of America's debt. Which I really think is kind of fine. You know, you lend money to your government, they pay it back with interest. You know, I don't really have a problem with Americans owning America's debt. We shouldn't have a national debt. We should have a balanced budget. But, you know, it's not as bad as China owns all the debt. But here's the thing. We believe the lie that we could finance a way into success. The government thinks they can always borrow money because every government's in debt to every other government all the time. For whatever reason. And they just keep upping the taxes, except we need up taxes and cut spending. Yeah, they're up taxes, but they always up spending.
If we're going to up taxes, then we should also have a living wage to go along with it because...
Exactly.
You know, even working construction, half the people I know aren't making $15 an hour.
Oh yeah, you know the trades. You have to own your own truck, have all your own tools, get your own education, just to make $13 an hour for the first 10 years.
Pretty much.
Yep.
And there are people that I know that have been in the trades for going on 15, 18 years, and they're only making like $15 to $18 an hour.
Oh yeah, and
After
many of those
almost 2
tradesmen
decades.
won't let you finish your apprenticeship with them because you turn into competition. They want you to go into trades to be apprentices, but once you get close, they'll can your ass because you're competition. That's why going to the trades is BS at the moment.
I don't know. I've had very good luck with the trades.
Well, yeah, you have, but I met a guy when I was up there for 4th of July, when I was at the DMV. He was going to be an electrician, but he couldn't find anyone to let him finish his apprenticeship because he would become competition as soon as he finished, and they didn't want the competition. So, that's at least a partial problem. But you see, if everyone if we would have kept up with inflation and just kept everyone at a living wage instead of try to get inflation to keep lowering wages in effect, and keep upping the price of everything else and keep upping the price of rent and whatnot and allowed everything essentially what we did is we stagnated the wages and then let the price of everything, food, housing, electricity, cable, what have you, to go through the roof.
Well,
our wages in essence diminished because of inflation.
Our wages have been stagnant for going on 40 years.
Yeah.
Because the buying power of the dollar today is comparable to what you were getting paid back in 1980.
Okay, 1974 with inflation, you would make 10 something an hour on the federal minimum wage right now, equivalent. But the federal minimum wage is only $7.25 an hour.
Yeah, so
And for some reason, I thought it was like almost 10. I don't know why I got that number in my head.
Because that's the
no,
Michigan minimum wage.
Or
yeah,
well, Michigan I think is like 9.25 or 9.50.
But the
But yeah.
point is, what I have to ask is, if all these companies could afford to pay them that equivalent in the 70s, why can't they
do
pay it now?
Right.
with inflation?
Yeah.
Because that's basically the problem is
And if these mom and pop shops can't stay in business, because even with all that decrease in wages due to inflation, then they are bad at business. And they are going to go out of business because that's the way business works. If you can't make it profitable, then you're going to go out of business.
pretty much
Why was it profitable in the 70s and 80s at that wage, but not profitable now with such a bigger economy?
simply because people don't want to pay any more money than they absolutely have to. There are actually people, I mean, there are people who are trying to sequester minimum wage.
Oh yeah, McDonald's has been lobbying to eliminate the minimum wage, which means, guess what? If they eliminate the minimum wage, you're gonna be making 50 cents an hour, or you're gonna be making, if that, you will make the wages they make in China. No, actually,
Well,
you'll make the wages they make in Africa, because China's now.
Well, look, people in California they were protesting for $15 an hour, so McDonald's went totally automated. They totally automated some of their restaurants in California to prove the point that we can just get rid of all of you.
Yeah, and that is an unsustainable economic model.
Yeah, that makes it so people don't want to eat where you're at.
I don't want to go to an automated McDonald's. I don't want to use that kiosk. I want to go see a person, give them my order, and have them make it for me.
Right.
The automated's not even that good. I've used an automated order system. You still have to go up to the cashier and pay. It's not like you don't.
Half the time, yeah. And
no, the ones in California, everything, you slide your ATM or you slide your bank card in.
Robots. It's all
electronic.
And then robots make your food.
Right.
Oh, damn.
And here's the thing. I'll go pay extra.
One person that runs the store, and that's just to oversee everything else.
Yeah, I'll pay extra to go to somewhere where I can have human interaction with my transaction. Thank you very much. Because I work in manufacturing. Those machines do not stay very well maintained for very long. And I guarantee you, give enough time, you're going to have metal shavings, grease from the oil, and everything else leaking out of those old robots in 5 years.
I mean, just look at self-checkout at any grocery store. Obviously, robots aren't that great.
No, I prefer the checkout lane. But anyways, we are running out of time for this episode.
We went over time, unfortunately, but we are glad that you guys got to hear our spiels. Thank you guys so much for listening and tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Yep, see you next time.
All right, guys, bye.
Bye.